Okay, so a few things have happened since my last news update, including a very big announcement to do with Duel. And right now, I'm showing you the poster for the new ride, and as you can tell from the get go, it's no longer called Duel anymore. It's actually now called the Curse of Alton Manor. And of course, for those of you who know the history of Duel, you'll know that originally it was just called Duel, and then it was called Duel the Haunted House Strikes Back after its refurbishment in like around the 2000s. So this is the first time it's had a refurbishment and actually had a major name change. So this is a big rebrand. And of course, what you can also see here is that the tone has genuinely switched up so much in this poster. And if I'm being honest, I'm actually quite surprised about that because Jewel has always been a family friendly type haunted house where it scares for all ages. And normally, due to a lot of the animatronics within the attraction being lit up by UV lights, normally the advertisements for it have been a similar vibrant theme, but still maintaining that element of it being a haunted house. So, of course, seeing the colour scheme being like a black and purple type thing, it really emphasizes how the theme has completely changed. And of course, I want to point out some details within this picture. So, first of all, above the house, which is actually the facade for Jewel, so nothing has changed with regards to that. Of course, in the top window, you can actually see a small figure. I just want to point that out first. I'm not really sure how that's going to be incorporated into the ride, if they're going to place an animatronic in the window. I do know that some people did think that was a good idea because, of course, it introduces the fact that there is something in this house that is supernatural. It's not being inhabited by something that's human. And I do actually like that little touch. I do hope they explore that. But the main thing that you'll probably notice is the girl covering her eyes at the top of the house. And of course, this girl is none other than Emily Alton, I believe. And for those of you who don't know who she is, in the backstory of the ride, there is a girl that possesses the house, and that is why it is haunted. And she is, in fact, the girl who wrote on the chalkboard, "The duel is over," with 6 plus 9 underneath it, which symbolised the end of Jules' existence because, of course, it did close on the 6th of September of 2022. And of course, this is very significant because it shows that in this ride, it will dig a lot deeper into the sort of backstory, the darkness behind it. And I know this is a bit of a tenuous link, but it kind of reminds me of how they've done Hex. Of course, Hex has always maintained the same storyline since it opened, but Hex has a much darker storyline to it, with, of course, the Earl of Shrewsbury going insane after a curse is put upon him, wherein for every branch that falls from an oak tree, it correlates to a family member's death. And so I do think that they're going to go on a similar line where they're going to explore a darker storyline when you actually think into it, because of course this man going absolutely insane and vaulting himself into his own house is quite extreme, but the ride still isn't scary to the point where children will avoid it. Of course, not making it too scary is understandable because children are a very large demographic of the park, but as you can tell by the poster, is definitely going to explore an avenue where it kind of goes into the troubled backstory of Emily Alton. And for a bit more layering with, the house, because it is opening as the track goes through it. So, if you've ever been in the very dizzying queue line of Jewel, which has different tiered flooring, so it really disorients you before you go on the ride, as if you've sort of transcended into a different alternative universe, which I do think is a cool effect. They might still employ that to kind of give you that sense of otherworldly nature. But within that queue line, there is actually a dollhouse which was open while the ride was open, but on the last day, it was actually closed because, of course, the house was returned back to Emily Alton. And as you can see, it's opening back up again, which symbolises the ride reopening. But it also shows how Emily Alton is in complete control of this house. So clearly, whatever's happening within this ride is controlled by her. I'm not too sure what the symbolism of the covering the eyes is. Possibly it's like a thing of, oh, it's so scary, you'll want to look away type thing. But I'm honestly not really sure with that. If anyone has any thoughts, please leave them in the comments below. You can also see around the poster there's quite a lot of creepy toys. There's like porcelain doll type things with little clowns and building blocks. So I assume something to do with that is going to happen. Maybe it's like you're being played around with by these spirits. I'm not really sure how that's going to come into play, but I do know that a lot of people are terrified of dolls. So if there's anything to do with haunted dolls in this house, because of course it is a doll house, so it is to be expected that there's going to be some sort of link to toys. Um, that might be quite scary. But overall, the way that the poster is so dark, it really does show that it's going to actually be a haunted house, and it's really going to dive more into the history behind it. As a final note on this poster, because of course there is a lot to dive into within this one image, which I find is really great from Alton Towers to have provided us with so many hints in one picture. But you can notice the trains, there are no blasters. The guns are gone. Unless this poster is misleading, but I severely doubt that. There is going to be no interactive element to it, which I find is absolutely great. Because, to be fair, as much as the interactive element was really good at times, and it could be a great laugh to compete with your friends, sometimes it distracts away from the experience, constantly looking for targets. Normally, the guns would break, and it was just all a bit noisy. But here you can see that the track system looks the exact same. It's the same sort of structure of car, but there isn't any blasters. So for those of you who didn't enjoy the interactive element, that is now gone by the looks of it. And also you can see just behind the logo that there are some hands reaching out. I'm not too sure if that's like also emphasizing the element of control over the haunted house. Um, Not entirely sure with that one, but they look they look dead, those hands. That's what I'm getting at. I'm not too sure what this means. I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments below because there's so much in this image and it's hard to predict when it's also dark and misty, you know what I mean? I'm editing right now and I just realised I forgot to mention when it's reopening. So it's reopening in spring predicted of this year, and I originally thought it wasn't going to reopen until 2024. So clearly I was out by like an entire year because I wasn't really sure on how long the work would take on it. So clearly I'm just used to refurbishment time being the same amount as what Valhalla is taking. But yeah, I was so excited about this that I completely forgot to mention it. And also, it's going to be weird having to call it a completely different name because I'm so used to it being Joel. I don't know how to feel about the name, but I'm very excited over it. Nevertheless, I will probably still keep referring to it as Joel because personally, the name is a lot shorter and it sounds catchy. So I don't know. It's a big change, but I am excited to see what they do with it because in recent years, Alton Towers certainly has rebranded itself to be much darker, more mature, apart from CBeebies Land, which kind of broke that trend. We've had Wicker Man, which we all know does not have a backstory of sunshine and rainbows. And then you have X Sector, which is literally just mind control but make it fun. So I do notice a trend of them rebranding to the rest of the park being much more mature, which I do like because oftentimes theme parks do take on a more family friendly theme, and sometimes it's nice to have the adrenaline on the rides and then the adrenaline after as you walk through a very moody forest type thing. So I do quite like the fact that they've taken this turn because of course, not all of us are children anymore, and as much as Jill might have been terrifying growing up, now it's nice to grow up with the fans that you introduced in the 2000s and give them something that will scare them now, maybe. Anyway, in other news, the big one seems to be getting another retrack, which I'm incredibly surprised about because I hadn't heard anything about it until, like, basically now. So this is kind of a thrown in part of the news update, should I say. Of course, once again, it's been retracked by Tazaka, who are based in Chorley, and they've done all the previous retrackings of the big one. I believe that the Pleasure Beach is trying to retrack the entirety of the big one, which I think is a great idea because I love the idea of maintaining coasters for years to come rather than just knocking them down and replacing them with something. Because the big one really is part of Blackpool Pleasure Beach's identity, even if there's newer things coming and there is already a new coaster there. Well, I say new, it's now coming up to 5 years old, Icon. So that's honestly, I wonder what ride they're going to get next. But this construction work is starting on February 7th, so there'll be a crane coming in, and thankfully, that's not going to interfere, as far as I know, with the opening of the Pleasure Beach, which I believe is March 18th, around that time. So I don't know, it feels like they're opening a bit later, but I'm not too sure. In recent years, they have opened a little bit earlier because, of course, with restrictions being in place, they wanted to kind of get the season to be a little bit longer to make sure that they were still earning profits. I'm not sure what else is happening at the Pleasure Beach right now because they haven't updated us on what's happening with the Big Dipper topper, whether they're repainting it, whether it's been reinstalled. They have added some updates about the history of it, which I think is nice. And there are some rumours of a big wheel coming as well, which personally I'm not a big fan of. I I don't enjoy big wheels. They're a bit boring, aren't they? As much as I am fond of flat rides coming back, I do believe that having flat rides as fillers is incredibly important because it at least distributes a crowd to a decent ride and doesn't keep everyone concentrated around roller coasters. But personally, from the fact that they have in fact acquired a copyright for something relating to a big wheel, oh, I don't really think it fits. I wonder what you guys think if this actually happens, but for me, I'm not really on board with it because I don't know, it doesn't fit the park. That's what I think. It doesn't really fit with the park. That there's big wheels on the piers. I feel like they should leave that sort of thing to the piers in Blackpool and they should keep to the thrill rides here because I don't think it's got that much appeal and it doesn't have the longevity. Anyway, that's it for this week's news update. If anything else comes up, I'll make sure to upload another video. But I really do hope you've enjoyed this. If it does seem like it's been a bit off the cuff, it's because it is, because I wanted to give my completely genuine reaction to the new Duel announcements. But I do hope you've enjoyed this. And of course, if you did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And this was just talking. Bye bye.